right, guys, welcome to the Disciples Podcast. I'm joined with Cam, and we've got a very special interview today. This is going
Yeah.
to be great. Just so happens that one of our friends is on the ground in Israel. He's part of the Red Heifer ritualistic burning, and he's all involved in that. And he's going to be making a docu-series on the whole thing that's going on. And I mean, this thing is going viral. There are so many people talking about it. People are bringing it up at the church. Welcome to the Disciples Podcast, where we dive into how Christian faith intersects with contemporary culture. All topics are on the table as we explore modern life through a Christian lens.
We're big on community, so we're not saying that Disciple is going to be your community, but it can be a place that fosters conversations that communities should be having, and let's introduce more thoughts, let's introduce more ways to follow Jesus.
Interviewing a guy who's like on the ground is great, and then other people, they have like real concerns with it. And, I think that while we wait for Chris to get on, he should be on in the next 5 to 10 minutes. And Cam, I know that you have a quick thing that you got to run to, so you might have to drop for the first part of it. But anyway, with that, Cam, what are your thoughts about what's happening in Israel right now?
Well, I'm really excited we're doing this interview. And, one of the things that we've come across, like you said, this has gone viral, is what is going on with the red heifer? Why is this important to Jews and Judaism? What does this mean for us as Christians? There's references in this for Islam as well. So unpacking the reality and the anxiety and where that comes from and what this actually means. So I think from the conversation we're going to have with Chris, what I'm looking forward to is saying, okay, Chris, what's really happening? What's the truth? As someone that's on the ground and involved in this project, what does this mean for our Jewish brothers and sisters? What does this mean for followers of Jesus? And then, even what does this mean for Islam? What does this mean for those who, for Islam, it's a reference to the end times based on some of the sayings of Muhammad. So people thinking it's the end of the world, people thinking it's a natural, loving transition, people that don't know what to think. I think it's going to be a great conversation because we get to unpack the significance of the red heifer, the sacrifice, how it's tied to the third temple, what it means for the Levitical priesthood, and what it means from a prophetic standpoint, from a modern day standpoint, for modernity. So unpacking some of that with Chris will be great.
Yeah, I mean, and they're well on their way. I mean, obviously they have the blemish-free red heifers. Chris sent me a picture with them. They've got, I think, 200 Levitical priests that fall in line with the scriptures, that have been trained up in that are pure and everything. So I mean, there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of Christians involved in this. It's really interesting because as I read through articles, obviously Al Jazeera is talking about how this is going to set off a holy war. You've got Christians that are concerned, that are talking about the second coming. You've got a lot of people that are kind of on the ground. And I think Chris is probably going to fit into this category of the people that are like, no, like this is meant to bring peace. This is meant to have a temple for all to come and worship God. And there's a lot of concerns, obviously, because it's going to be where the Dome of the Rock is, or that's where the temple's believed to be. So there's just a lot of stuff, and I think for me personally, and I don't know where you line up, I'd love to hear it, but I actually go back and forth between being pre-trib and post-trib, because every time I listen to a pastor on either side, I kind of they make compelling arguments on both sides, and so I'm not sure where I line up on all this, right? Personally, me, and that's why I love to have Chris on, because I want to hear his perspective, because he's on a whole different, he's very much on that. We've got to rebuild the third temple kind of side, and I think there's a biblical precedent for that for sure. But one of the things that I'm seeing, actually, what, let me ask your opinion real quick, because I want to jump into another topic after I hear your opinion on that. I don't want to segue too fast.
Yeah. I'm a pre-trib. I'm a pre-trib guy, but that's always subject to change. It's something that, if it were the end times now and it turned out to be post-trib, I would just be like, all right, Lord, I was kind of hoping it was pre-trib, but buckle up, I guess. I guess we'll do this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe I from my understanding of reading Revelation, I go pre-trib, but this is one of the things that I always say. There's the 3 Ds whenever we have a conversation in Christianity. There's things that we die for. Jesus Christ is the Son of God, lived a perfect life, died on the cross, rose again. There are things that we divide for. So, we have reasons why we're not Catholic, for example, but a believing Catholic and I are brothers and sisters in the church, right? So my personal perspective is with believing, professing Christians, people that believe the things that we would die for, they are part of the church, but I'm going to divide with them because I think there are more accurate places and ways to worship based on God's word. And then there are things that we debate for. And pre-trib, post-trib is one of the things that I would debate for with anyone in my church. And maybe they convince me, maybe I convince them, or maybe we just both walk away going, I think so, but I don't know. And usually pre-trib, post-trib, that's kind of the Calvinist, Arminianist, areas where I'm willing to debate from what I understand. And also at the same time, it's not a hill I'm going to die on.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we go back to the Old Testament and the Jews, and the reason why they killed Jesus was because they had a misunderstanding of the coming Messiah, right? So who knows if we have a misunderstanding, right? So, and again, this is just I'm trying to stay in the middle, but I'm telling you, I can listen to our church, which is pre-trib, and go to the class and be like, wow, that's really compelling, and then I can listen to Vodi Bakum and go, maybe not. So that's just kind of where I am. But one of the things that I think, and I don't know if we're going to get into this with Chris, but I think that one of the things that we're seeing right now, especially with the war and just so many people dying, whether it was on October 7th or whether it's the people in Gaza, I mean, it's just, and look, that was their 9/11. And I think that America acted very poorly in response to our 9/11 in terms of the casualties and the lives lost and stuff. So, I always pray for peace. I pray for strong leadership. The Abraham Accords were a great start. Saudi Arabia shooting down some of those Iranian drones, amazing, right? But I think that with that said, one of the things that is really troubling me is with Christians who, I think there's kind of 3 categories of Christians when it comes to Israel. There's the super Zionist, pro-Israel, it all goes back to Israel. Then there's the Christians that are in the middle who, and this is where I tend to be, this is where I am. I'll say that right now. And maybe subject to change, but right now I'm pretty confident in this, which is that, Israel, the Jews are God's chosen people, and God made room for the Gentiles on the tree, Romans 11. And, we're grafted into God's children. And eventually one day, God will reconcile all Jews in Israel back to him, right? So I think that, that leads me to the 3rd category, which are Christians that just, they're anti-Semitical. They hate Jews, right? I think that's a hard place to be as a Christian. But, we are seeing that.
Yeah, it's not very Christ-like. And, I would imagine with Chris, I know I'm probably going to ask him a couple questions of what's going on, because the way I view October 7th, the way I view post-October 7th, and the way I view things before October 7th is often as a tragedy. So one of the things that I think is really important to point out is that as followers of Jesus, our goal is to have his kingdom come, right? The kingdom of heaven is at hand. And so with that in mind, our brothers and sisters are both Jews, are both Muslims, are both Christians, in the sense that we are not all God's children, because we have the promise of the idea that those who believe in him earn the right to become God's children, but we all are made in God's image. And we are supposed to be people that are praying for the oppressed in all circumstances and doing what we can in that way. So I do want to get his perspective. I am going to have some questions on that. I'm probably not going to press one way or another. It's more along the lines of, there is a tremendous amount going on in Israel. And that's why, one of the reasons why this Red Heifer conversation has so many people with anxiety, right? They see wars and rumors of wars. And I think that as followers of Jesus, it is very important for us to care for those without power, especially. And when we see innocents, whether they're the hostages or whether they're the innocents in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, who are undergoing tremendous, tremendous violence and tragedy. I'm just going to put tragedy, and there are things that led to it before October 7th. There's what happened after October 7th, which is an absolute travesty. And then there's what's happened afterwards. So I think it's really important as believers, like you said, there are those that on that wide spectrum. For people that would be super Zionist, to people that would be anti-Semitic, and saying that, we are followers of Jesus, and with that, it is to love like Christ loved, and not to get lost in that. So anti-Semitism is definitely not Christ-like, and indiscriminate killing of innocents is not Christ-like. And I guess I'll leave it there, because that's not the point of it. I believe that that's something I'm going to ask. I want someone's perspective who's been on the ground, and this is a hotly contested issue. So I think it's worth having a question or two, but probably not a place we'll press.
Yeah, I mean, it is a tough situation, because at the same time, like, the big takeaway from reading the Bible is that we're the bad guys. So when tragedies and horrible things happen, it's like, yeah, that's expected. But I mean, at the same time, like, we maybe it's always going to be praying for peace. Blessed are the peacemakers, and with all that. So I don't know if we're going to get into that. If you ask, we'll talk to Chris about his perspective. But with that, Chris is about to get on. Cam, I know that you have to jump for a little bit. I'm probably going to reintroduce the topic and talk to Chris a little bit ahead of schedule, just to kind of warm up and stuff. And then, just join back when you can. And with that, let's welcome our guest, Chris Granzow, on. So he has been on the ground in Israel, part of the ritualistic burning with the red heifers that are out there, and also the rebuilding of the temple. Fun fact, the night that Iran launched the drones, he called our co-owner Mark, and he was over at my house. So it was crazy. Just really glad that you're back home safe, even though I know that you're probably going back to Israel soon. So
Yep.
so with that, I mean, we're going to get into it today, kind of talk about what's going on out there. It's been all over the news, and Chris's role, and just sort of, the whole scope of what's happening in Israel right now. Just real quick, I want to caveat up front, there's a lot of confidential stuff out there. So Chris, if I ask a question that maybe you can't answer, just let us know. I know that we have to be careful with, the security concerns, and also media concerns, and confidentiality of the people involved, and everything else. So, but with all that said, we really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no, really. Thanks for having me, Jared. And like I said, been a big supporter of you guys with Disciple ever since the creation of what you guys started there. So really, really respect and honor. Even got a nice new Disciple hat on. So yeah, just excited to be here with you today.
Awesome. Well, with that, how about you just tell us about yourself, right? Background, and then maybe after that, go into what's your involvement with all this.
No, definitely. Well, long background. I've actually been a friend of Mark Sturry's for many years. We actually have partnered together on several mission-related activities. We, actually helped him with the startup of his hospital in Zambia, and some different things over there in Zambia. So really, really respect the heart there behind both Mark and yourself, and Disciple. I am the chairman of the Christian Agency for Israel, which focuses on Aliyah, which is the Jewish immigration back to Israel, which is prophesied all throughout the Bible. We also focus on humanitarian aid and education, focusing on helping Christians understand their biblical role in Israel and what God's currently doing there. And so that definitely came into play with what my last trip here. I just got back a day or so ago from Israel. Part of that is helping the Christian world at large understand what actually is happening, and how to come in agreement and in cooperation with the Jewish leaders of faith, and actually understand that, God's got some pretty amazing things going on, and is bringing all the pieces and parts together for his glory.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. It's funny, on the ground, back here, just in Charlotte, I have all types of guys in Bible studies that go to our church that are talking about this. Other people are like, wait, what's going on out there? And they're having to explain it. And it's like, oftentimes I think Christians kind of think of this as like, more of a Jewish thing of rebuilding the temple and stuff like that. And I think that that's a great place to start. So, what's kind of the role of Christians in the rebuilding of the temple versus the Jews? Like, what's the different perspectives?
Well, honestly, there's a lot of Christians that I would say that don't have any concept or understanding about really even the significance of the temple, or what the original was, the tabernacle, and how that relates to their faith. So, one, I would say that's a great place to start if if you are a Christian, want to learn more. I mean, just start right there in Genesis with Moses when God gave Moses the plans to build the tabernacle and what the purpose of that was, which was in the redemption of sins, which we know was then fulfilled through Yeshua, Jesus Christ. Um, but the it's always been about how God communicates and interacts with His people, and so that being said, the Jewish faith still believes that that is the proper way to communicate and atone for sins. They don't believe that their Messiah has come back yet. They believe the Messiah is coming, and so that is a necessary step for that to happen. That being said, though, there are many, many prophetic scriptures there that actually talk about how the wealth of the nations and the really the Gentiles, which are modern day Christians, will be playing a major role in the rebuilding of the temple and what that looks like. There is a role that Christians are to play in this. And like I said, it's really up to them to start to understand that and take on that mantle.
Oh wow. Okay. So what is kind of like the relationship between, because obviously Jews are looking at it one way and Christians are looking at it another way. Like what's sort of the partnership like between the two?
Well, I think it's a very good partnership. I've seen many, many beautiful relationships between Jewish and Christian organizations and just Jews and Christians in general. As we're getting closer and closer to what God's doing, it's there's obviously been a lot of hurt and pain from not just the last few generations, but for thousands of years, going back to the Crusades and everything, where there has been a big misunderstanding and a big conflict between both the Christians and Jews. But I've seen that even just in the last year soften, and really a lot of the Jewish fathers of faith, the rabbis and different Jewish leaders, really looking to Christians to say, hey, we see that you love us and you're supporting us, and that you want to help us in all of our endeavors, including what the future building of the third temple will be. And so really, I see amazing cooperation coming together on this. And there, like I said, there is a role. So a friend of mine, Byron Stinson, he is an amazing man of God, Christian man of God from Texas. Uh, he was actually the initial one who took the step of faith to say, hey, I want to help and start finding these pure red heifers because they started to pop up in herds around Texas. And so then he ended up partnering with one of the head rabbis in Israel. And again, as just a Christian from America, taking that step of faith to saying, hey, this is something that is prophetically will happen, is said that it will happen. And it's also something that the Jewish leaders are looking to have happen, but they can't do it on their own. And so, like I said, that's been a beautiful coming together of Christians and Jewish people of faith in starting to bring about things of God and things of Israel.
Yeah, wow. It's an incredible time to be alive, really. So I guess for people who maybe they don't know the history here, they don't understand why there needs to be this ritualistic burning of the red heifers, like maybe could you go over kind of the scope of exactly what the overall plan is here?
Yeah. Well, there's not a ton of information about it, but back when Moses was given the command by God to build the tabernacle. This happened when they had come out of Egypt. They were traveling in the wilderness. He went up on Mount Sinai, received the 10 Commandments. One of the biggest things was he actually wasn't just receiving the 10 Commandments, he actually received the plans to build the tabernacle, which again was a way that God could then commune and interact with his people and actually create a mechanism for the atonement of their sins. And the very first step in that process was, he said, you need to take a pure red cow, and by that it's a cow that has only red hairs. It can't even have two white hairs touching. And even if one has one white hair, it's kind of on the edge of if it's okay. And then they actually have to burn that to complete ash. It's also a very humane process. You humanely slaughter the cow. It has to be kosher, so it cannot. The cow can't feel any pain or anything like that. So it's all completely humane. The same way you would, if you were, slaughtering them for meat or for anything else. But that step is they have to be burnt to ash. You then take that ash, you mix it with the water of the Gihon spring and with the ancient cedars of Lebanon, wood particles, and together you have that mixture that then is used in the anointing of the high priest, and then you're able to actually generate priesthood out of that, and then it begins the process of then you have the priesthood, and then you can start to build the temple. And so this goes all the way back to the time of Moses. There wasn't a lot of explanation given to why the red heifer. One of my personal theories was, when Moses was up on Mount Sinai and he came back down to the Israelites worshiping a golden cow, and it really infuriated both Moses and God, and so much he broke the tablets, and then he had to go back up and get the 10 Commandments and do all that. There was a lot of punishment from that as well. That one of my theories is it might have been God just saying, hey, you thought you could go to a cow for your problems and for your worship, but now you're going to start off this process by burning a cow to ashes to show that this isn't this isn't the way to do things. You got to do it the way I say it, the way God says it. But that's just a thought of mine. Again, there's just very little information there. But regardless, this is the process, and this is something that's happened all throughout history in the process of the temple. But this is a ritual that hasn't, we haven't seen this for thousands of years. So this is another step in history of the Jewish people, and now also for the Christian people.
Wow. Yeah. Hey Cam, do you want to ask a question here?
Yeah, we've got a beautiful segue actually. So Chris, Cam, sorry I'm late coming on the call. I really appreciate taking the time. With that in mind, one of the things that's so interesting, especially that we live in interesting times, is that in the Islamic faith as well, the Prophet Muhammad has a book of sayings, and in his book of sayings, he says that the sacrifice of the red heifer is approachment to the end times. So it's not in the Quran, it's in his book of sayings. So Islam also has a tangential role. We as Christians with the Judeo world value, supporting Israel is a very common theme that you see, especially in the Western church. And with what's going on currently with the state of Israel, which there is always a debate, is the current modern state of Israel the idea of the Israel of old, and what comes with that. But what would you say to a lot of people now that when I saw these news articles about the red heifer in Texas, it's this idea of the end times. There's the war taking place in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and this is the play to get the temple rebuilt. And, it's the great enemy of the West, America, or of the Islamic faith, America, is now supplying these cows that's taking place. So if we put it into context for now, there's a lot of concern taking place for all three of the major Abrahamic faiths. When you put this into context for the modernity, what do you see this as you kind of put all these elements together? And I'm sure you're getting a ton of questions because it just came out along with the war that's taking place. I mean, for modern day Christians that are trying to sort, is this a sign of the end times? Is it not a sign of the end times? Is this thing going back to a natural order? There's so many questions that come from This is Old Testament. We're in modernity. There are so many factors at play. How are we supposed to approach this in modern times?
Yeah, no, obviously that's a great question, and obviously a legitimate concern for many out there. Um, One thing I can tell you, we could talk about the prophetic timeline all day long and get into theories and all kinds of questions. But one thing I like to tell people is we know for a fact we're somewhere in between Genesis and Revelations, and we're probably a lot closer to Revelations. And so that being said, I do know time is of the essence in our world. That's why I purposely am living as if time is short and God's got things that has to get done. That's why my personal prayer is, God, use me. It's the Jewish saying Hanani is, I am here. God, help. I'm here to help. I'm here to do whatever you need. But that being said, and this is why I'm actually even helping with this project. The temple itself is not a temple that is built on violence. It's not built on destruction. It's not built on hatred. It's something that's supposed to be uniting for all nations, for all people. It's supposed to be a place of worship for everybody. And that's even a lot of the Jewish leaders. They don't want to discriminate. They're saying, hey, this is a place of worship for everyone to interact with God. And so it's not supposed to be a point of conflict. It's supposed to be a point of unity and a point of peace. And so, the one thing I can tell you is that with all the people involved, everyone that I've met, at no point are they saying, hey, we want to see, something horrific happen to, the Arab world or to the Christian world or to the Jewish, that is not where this is coming from. This is coming from a place of, we want peace and we want respect for everyone involved. And we're not going to be able to build that temple until that can happen. And so, we're really believing that God is going to provide a way. I mean, he's got a plan. Again, you get into the prophetic, it spells out in quite detail about, what will happen in the end days. And, you go into the Tanakh, which is, Isaiah, Micah, Ezekiel. There is, like I said, we could talk for hours and hours about, the prophetic timeline. But I very much personally believe that we're in that. Obviously you can see that as a sign of the times, but all to say that this isn't going to be something that's built upon on violence. This is going to be something that's built upon by peace. I know currently, like I said, I was in Israel the other day when Iran and the others were coming against Israel, and obviously that wasn't a very peaceful act, but we did see God prevail and an actual miracle happen where 99% of everything that came in was blocked. No one got hurt, nothing got destroyed. It truly was I believe, an act of God that prevailed that night. And I think we're just at the beginning of seeing God's hand at work here to start to pave the way for peace. And like I said, it's not that everyone has to understand everything, but it's going to be where, with what we're doing, we want to actually open up that conversation. We want to say, hey, this is a conversation that, we want to see all sides. We want you guys to see our perspective, and we want to see your perspective, and together we can find respect for each other in that. And then in doing so, we'll ultimately be able to get to, the burning of the cows. We'll be able to get to the building of the temple. But because the nations will want, it actually says, that's one of the scriptures, it says the nations will be calling for the building of the temple. So until that happens, until we have all the nations saying, yes, let's bring out this temple, then it's not going to happen. So that's, I hope that answered that a little bit.
Yeah, Chris, what's interesting, real quick, Cam, Saudi Arabia actually partook in shooting down some of the drones coming from Iran. And I guess shout out to the Abraham Accords. But, there is an element of hope for the future for sure. But as Christians, we're told that, the time could be 5 minutes, it could be 500 years, right? So, it is pretty remarkable. Cam, did you want to have a follow up the way you just said?
No, I thought that was great. It's one of those things that I really appreciate, because as a disciple podcast, we always want to bring it back to, these are interesting topics, but our job is to take our daily bread and follow Jesus every day. Because I can sit with Chris and Jared and you guys and talk about this and say, well, it's over the dome of the rock, and there's no way this is going to get fixed, and this is going to be a mess, and there's going to be it's going to be horrific. But like you said, I think the perfect thing to remember in this is, it's interesting. We need to read the Tanakh. We need to understand as much as we can. And ultimately, though, it's following Christ as we go through this progression of what our time is going to look like, whether our time is the end time or not. And I guess, and maybe you've already answered this, but my follow-up question would be, from a logistical standpoint, as you're a member of this project, what does this look like for the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? I mean, from the short term, what does this look like in a tangible, logistical way from right now?
Well, with what I can talk about, obviously the next step would be, in God's timing, actually doing the burning of the red heifer, which there are still logistical hurdles to come up, to overcome with that. There's also, again, this is also something of the nations is supposed to want this, and so we want to see a big involvement from the nations around the world, and leaders of the nations to come and be in support of this, or actually even partake in this. So again, there's logistics that need to happen. So, when it's funny watching all these articles pop up where it's like, oh, the cows were secretly sacrificed in Jerusalem today. And I'm like, just kind of laughing, like, oh, well, the cows must have did that on their own, it's because, again, this isn't going to be something of, it's a secret and it's hidden, and it's, we're trying to secretly cause World War III in doing this. This is a God's timing, and when it's ready for this to take place, it will take place. Obviously we're doing our parts to make sure that we're ready for God's divine timing in this. But obviously that is the next step. Working with the Temple Institute in Israel, they have been preparing the priesthood for about 50 years. They've been raising up these young men who will eventually take on the priesthood, and they keep raising up new ones because eventually they age out of their requirement. But they do have the young men ready. And these also, just like the cows, these young men have to be pure and defect free. They have to be basically their entire lives they're raised in what's called upper rooms. So like the upper room from Yeshua in the Last Supper, that upper room, the reason it's called the upper room, because it's 9 arm lengths above the ground, to ensure that anyone that's living in that upper room is not near death, which would be, these young priests have never been around death. They weren't born in hospitals. They weren't born, they've been kept away so they could be pure. And then, like I said, ultimately when this ceremony takes place with the red heifers, it will then start off that course of events to anoint the priesthood. And so, that is ready, and then, like I said, there's a lot of other things that, I'm hoping as time goes on, I can get into more details about other amazing things God's pulling together. But just know that God is very much in the works here, and bringing the right people together in the right places and the right countries. And so, one thing I would encourage anyone who wants to get involved, wants to see what's going on, is one is get into your Bible, get into the prophets. One of my favorites, Isaiah. Isaiah is a great place to start. Isaiah, Ezekiel, Zechariah, Micah, Amos. Those are often a lot of overlooked books of the Bible for most people, but really something that, this is where my heart's at in this. So with the Christian Agency for Israel, we focus on Aliyah, which is the immigration of Jewish people back to Israel. But Aliyah actually means to ascend to the Temple Mount. It was actually part of the yearly ritual. Like right now we're in Pesach, which is Passover. It would be a requirement of everyone in Israel to pilgrimage to Jerusalem and actually ascend or make Aliyah up to the Temple Mount and make their sacrifice. And in doing so, that's part of the rituals of the atonement of sin for the Jewish people. We're actually called, even as believers, to do that as well, to pilgrimage back to Jerusalem. That's why I was there just for at least the beginning of Pesach just a day ago. But in this Aliyah, I don't know if you guys know this, but the Aliyah is mentioned, or the future return of the Jewish people back to Israel is mentioned over 700 times in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament. Something that one of my partners said to me a long time ago. He's like, if God says something one time, it's important. If he says something 700 times, you should probably pay attention. And so that really inspired me to take, it was not just a passive viewer role of saying, hey, I understand the Bible, I understand what God wants to do in this world, but I actually took that step of faith and said, hey, how can I help with Aliyah? And we actually went and partnered with the Jewish Agency for Israel and actually helped build housing for these immigrants coming back. Right now it's a lot of Ukrainian immigrants, Russian immigrants, Ethiopian immigrants that are all Jewish that are making their return to Israel. But again, they are actually fulfilling prophecy in doing so. I encourage is that you can actually not only understand what God has said prophetically will happen, but you can actually take an active role in that, in fulfilling that prophecy yourself as a Christian. And honestly, God has called the Christians to take up that role, to be the watchman on the walls of Jerusalem, and actually come and partake in what God's doing in Israel.
That's incredible. Because I think one of the great things that I'm taking away from this, Chris, is, when you hear that there's a Levitical priesthood that is ready to be ordained, and you hear that there's a red heifer that is ready to be sacrificed, and at the same time, that there's a war going on, and you hear rumors of wars and earthquakes and things of that nature. As believers, we're told not to be afraid many times in the Bible, but I think for a lot of believers, this is an anxiety-producing thing. And it is helpful to hear from you to say, look, read your Bible and be at peace, and knowing that God is in control of this. This is something that is done in love, and that it is a sign of good things to come, and of good prophecies compared to something to have anxiety about.
Yeah, actually, good little story from just the other day. I had spent the day before the attack on Israel from Iran the other day. I actually spent that day filming and producing other content we're working on in Israel, actually in the Shepherd's Fields, in where the Tower of the Flock is, Bethlehem Ephrata, with Byron Stinson, who brought over the Red Heifers. And I had Psalms 23 just bouncing around in my head all day, because I'm literally in the fields where David wrote the Psalms. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me, lay down in green pastures, and I'm in those pastures. But that night, as we got news that the attack was coming, I was right in downtown Jerusalem, and basically sitting on a balcony and watching from the direction I knew they were going to come from. And instead of being like frantic, I gotta get in the bunker and we gotta do this and this and this, we just kind of hung out and relaxed, because that same verse was still in my head, where I'm literally overlooking the actual valley of the shadow of death, which is right there in Jerusalem. I'm overlooking it, and then I go, and I will fear no evil, because I know God is with me. His rod and his staff, they're comforting me. And not only that, but he says, then I will prepare a table before you in the presence of your enemies. So I'm like, it's one of those things where even among all this, God's got a feast in store for us. And so, that's what I say. And, I've just heard everybody saying, like, during that attack, everybody had Psalms in their head. Everybody had that on their hearts, because I guess, God it was one of those things where it's like, hey, no, this is a time to rejoice in God's providence and protection for his people, because his word is true, and he said, this is what I'm going to do. So being there and living that out and watching a real life miracle play out in front of you, again, while being involved in these amazing things that God is doing, it's just one of those things where honestly, going through New York City on the way back yesterday, I felt more endangered with what I'm seeing happen at Columbia University and places. So it's God is definitely very much at work here, and that's where I encourage every Christian to just say, you know, God, let Your will be done, and what do You want me to do in this? Because there's a lot that needs to get done in a very short time, and if you're willing to take that step of faith and listen to what God wants you to do, He's gonna take you to places that you couldn't even imagine.
Yeah, for anybody listening that wants to have a New Testament precedent for this, I would just recommend they read Romans 11. I'm not going to
Yeah,
read the whole chapter, but
yeah.
I think we've kind of touched on this security concerns, and obviously, the concern is that, and this is kind of what the media is saying, is what Al Jazeera is saying, is that Israel plans on desecrating the Dome of the Rock, which is the third most sacred religious site for the Muslims, and that's going to start a holy war and all these different things. And
One thing I'd like to say about that, it may be the third most holy site for the Muslim world, but it's the number one most holy site for the Jewish world.
right,
And
exactly.
that's what they forget a lot.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the horrible thing that happened, the slaughter that happened on October 7th, the Hamas leader actually talked about this specific. And again, he probably was looking at more from a propaganda standpoint to get other Islamic countries to join in, right? But are you? I know you talked about some of the security concerns, but what sort of it like on the ground? I know you said a lot of people, they know that they're doing God's will, so that's giving them peace about it. But I mean, are you hearing concerns in Israel from people that are involved in this? What sort of your take on that?
Well, I mean, again, it's a lot of trust in God. It's a lot of leaning not on your own understanding. But I will say, and this is what I tell people all the time: is statistically speaking, Jerusalem is the safest city in the entire world. There's no attack like muggings or rapes or anything like that happen there. It's a very, very safe city. You'll see middle school kids running around at midnight, going from house to house, and no one's bothering them, no one's abducting them. There's no gang violence. But every once in a while, one of the crazy neighbors does shoot some rockets over or something like that, and that's why it's getting this terrible reputation that it's a very dangerous place. And like I said, there's certain areas within Israel that can be dangerous, but you got to go through checkpoints to get there and things. So from a perspective of like if you were wanting to tour Israel, it's extremely safe. Like I said, I'm over there all the time. We've brought hundreds of tours over, and never had an issue with any single one of them. Even a tour, we had a big tour there on October 7th when that happened. We got everyone out perfectly safe and fine. But it's the one thing to keep in mind about Israel is that pretty much everybody is required to do military service. So, there's a very interesting thing that happens in Israel. If say there's an emergency, like, someone's having a heart attack or there is something going on, if that was happening in America, you usually have everyone running away from that situation. And then you maybe have one or two people running in, like a cop or a firefighter or something. In Israel, it's the opposite. When something happens, you have everybody rushing into that situation because everybody's trained, everyone knows how to deal with it. And they all have unique skills that they're bringing to that situation as a problem solving method. And but even then, being in Israel, I was hanging out with my friends over there, and they're either active or reserve duty, IDF. They're so they all have guns slung over their shoulders and rifles and things. So it's I mean, you're not going to go anywhere in Israel, especially right now, without every single person being alert to any potential threats or danger. And like I said, it's really when I was over there, honestly I feel safer over there than I do when I'm in Israel, or when I feel safer in Israel than I do when I'm in America. even given the current situation.
With the current war going on, and their, with their Palestinian brothers and sisters, and I think if you spend time on YouTube and Reddit and Instagram, you'll also see Christian missionaries or pilgrims that can often get rough treatment from some Orthodox Jews. And I love hearing your story that, hey, it's overwhelmingly positive, it's overwhelmingly loving, but there are some serious tensions going on right now, and I'm glad to hear that it is safe in Jerusalem. But surely, just human to human tension, there is a war going on. There are always pilgrims here. There does seem to be some conflict, especially with that extreme Orthodox community. Just kind of your thoughts on that from an anecdotal standpoint, or what you're hearing or seeing.
Yeah, and I mean, I am definitely not. I'm not negating the fact that anti-Semitism is very much on the rise, especially in Europe, in certain places in America and in South America. It is becoming a major issue. Again, it's my sentiment was, hey, let's all just respect each other. There's not, and honestly, that's, and I've gotten into conversations with people who are pro-Palestine, even pro-Hamas, and when you actually start having conversations with them, their arguments kind of fall flat pretty quickly because they just don't understand the situation. They're, and I mean, especially, some of the very far left people that are, they just don't understand. Like, I've seen things like drag queens that are supporting, Hamas and Palestine, and I'm like, you wouldn't last very long if you were actually over in Jordan or Iran. They just genuinely don't understand who they're supporting and what they're saying. And so, I do understand coming from the Orthodox community. There's also misconceptions, misunderstandings. There's a lot of fear there. I know we're a little young for this, but our parents and our grandparents, they lived through a time when Jews were rounded up and killed in extermination camps. And so it's not that far in the distance of, especially some of these Jewish leaders. I know a lot of Holocaust survivors. So, the idea that things can get out of hand very quickly is a very real possibility for them. So them, for anyone who's already dealt with such horrific, circumstances like that, and now just like October 7th, I mean, that was even probably some of the most horrific things that as a world, we've ever seen in modern day. To be living in that again, it can raise a lot of fear. It can raise, it can kind of back you into a corner. And and like I said, you may or may be saying things that you're saying just because you are afraid for your life. So again, that's where I just encourage everyone. If you're going to take a stance on this issue, you need to understand this from all sides, because it's not just cut and dry. It's not Israel's the big bad guy and Palestine is the little nothing that can't defend itself. No, it's when you actually look at the Muslim world, there's hundreds of millions of Muslims, and there's only a few million Jews. And what is being portrayed on the news media is not the entire story. So I really they did this beautiful job. A group of counter-terrorists. It's a counter-terrorist strike force in Israel that we've worked with before that deals with terrorism, and they do this beautiful explanation of how the media covers situations. And what they do is they have a big training center where they bring the group out, and they say, okay, we're going to run a scenario, but just act naturally, do what you would do. And literally within seconds, guys pop out of nowhere, everywhere in this little training area, and they just start shooting guns. It's like full live rounds. They're shooting guns at targets. They're grabbing hostages. They're doing this whole scenario. Most of the time, everybody basically runs away or hides under a desk or hides behind a wall or something. And then they run this whole scenario then where like the counter-terrorist group comes in and actually, takes out the threats, rescues the hostages and takes them to safety. But after this is said and done, they bring the whole group back out and they start interviewing everyone and they go, so what did you see happen? And the one guy that was hiding under the desk, he's like, well, I didn't see anything. I heard gunshots and I saw the bottom of the desk I was under. And they asked the other guy and they go, okay, well, what did you see? Well, I saw a bunch of people running that direction and yelling, and I went and hid behind this wall. And and so basically what they're doing is they're providing the example that when the news media now shows up after the fact and they're interviewing people, they're not even getting the story. They don't know what happened. They don't, they're saying, oh, I saw these people yelling and I saw these people shooting and I saw this, but that's not accurate to what really happened. And the unfortunate part of this is that, especially with what the IDF has to deal with on a regular basis, very unlike America, is they keep things confidential because it is national security. So they're not coming out to the news media and doing a press conference and saying, hey, this is what happened and this is all the details, and because it jeopardizes what they have going on. So with that in mind, what you're seeing on the news is not only just a little fraction of the real story, but usually it's not even close to what is truthfully happened.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
look, we're seeing at Columbia University a little microcosm of the Middle East, and I think it goes back to, and again, not to say Israel's perfect and they haven't made mistakes, but it's the Dennis Prager argument of, if Israel put their guns down, there would be genocide. If Hamas put their guns down, there would be peace, right? And after October 7th, there weren't Jewish people shutting down schools and rioting in the streets and abusing Muslims, like some of the Jewish students at Columbia have had to deal with. But we're kind of seeing it on the other side, and this isn't an attack against Muslims, but obviously, at our universities, they've just been radicalized, and there is that radical sentiment among some that are out there. So we get a little micro dosing of Israel here in the United States.
Yeah, like I said,
Because
in some ways it's a lot more intense than you get in Israel.
it's the question I always have to, because like, this is a Disciple podcast, and we just know that there are so many Palestinians suffering, and it's this idea that they suffer under Hamas. They've suffered. I mean, there has been mistreatment by the Israeli state. A lot of people refer to it as an open air prison, and there are a lot of lovely Jews at the same time. So, and with the work that you're doing, the question I always have as a follower of Jesus is, I go, okay, Lord, like, what are ways we can pray for both sides, but what are ways that I can support the Jewish state and the Jews here locally, especially what's going on? But how do I also support my Palestinian brothers and sisters? I mean, because Palestine is made up of Muslims and of Christians. There was the church that was bombed as well. And it's this idea, especially with someone that's on the ground, of, okay, we know that Hamas is a terrorist organization, but we also know that there's innocent women, children, and men. And the same thing that's going on in Israel, where there's innocent Jews that have been attacked in different ways. What can we do for both sides as believers, from what you're seeing on the ground, to support the Palestinian people, to support the Jews, to support this conflict? What are ways that you would recommend?
Yeah, and and first and foremost, I want to say that is exactly my heart. Is this isn't just about the Jewish people, or it's not just about the Christians. This is about everybody. It's some of my best friends over there in Israel are Arab. Some of my best friends are Jewish. Some of my best friends are South African. It really doesn't matter about who where you're from and your family and your heritage. It matters where your heart's at, and and how you hold yourself as a person. Again, I can also say a lot of what the media has portrayed the conflict in Gaza and in those areas has been misrepresented in a lot of ways. Like I said, when you really dive down into it, you realize it's not an open air prison. It's not any of those kind of things. And really, the sad thing is that they gave the Palestinian Authority the ability to run the show, and then the Palestinians themselves have voted and chose who their leadership will be. The very unfortunate thing was they chose Hamas as their leadership, and so it's one of those sad things that's that's who now they have to deal with. And given that though, again, well, the biggest thing I can say for any of this is just pray. Is having a constant prayer for everyone involved. I mean, this is when I was there in Israel the other day, and there was bombs dropping from Iran, and cruise missiles coming in. There wasn't a little homing device on the front of that cruise missile that said this is only intended to hit a Jewish person or only intended to hit a Christian person. That cruise missile was planning to hit whoever it was going to hit, whether they were Palestinian, were they Arab, were they Jewish, were they, whatever. And so this is an attack against all the people there that are wanting to live in peace. So, condemning violence wherever it is really what's necessary. Now I'm not saying condemning protecting yourself. I'm where I'm from, it's someone comes into your home and threatens you and your family, then you have every right to defend yourself. And that's what we saw on October 7th. And we continue to see until these hostages are all brought back home. I mean, there's still hostages that are, it's been, over 6 months where they're living in the worst conditions possible, being tortured. And, so this isn't going to end until we get those people back. Those are our brothers and sisters and children. It's completely unacceptable that that's still even an issue. That should have been dealt with immediately. And so that being said, is I'm not condemning what Israel has had to do in terms of their actions, but I'm condemning acts of violence, cruelty, hatred towards people. That's the real understanding is when they say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. They're actually calling for the genocide of all the Jewish people, because they're saying Israel shouldn't exist as a nation. And again, this is a proven that this is the land that is historically Jewish. And the reality is a lot of the Palestinians, they're Jordanian, they're Syrian, they're from other areas that were brought in by the UN. We can get into a lot of the geopolitics of the area, but like I said, so the first big thing to do is just pray. The second is to really be educated, is to learn what has happened and why the world is the way it is today. Why there's the people groups that are where they're at, what led to that, and then and also understand the politics that have happened over the years that have tried to create a sustainable living situation for everyone, and to understand that wasn't all sides weren't always amenable to that, and they just continued to say, hey, we want all the Jews dead. Like I said, it's something that's happened over and over again. The last big time it happened, it was Hitler, and now it's Hamas and Iran. Iran in their parliament, you can go right now and see that they're chanting death to Israel and death to America. So these people aren't going to stop until they accomplish a very evil goal of theirs. And so again, that's where we got to turn it over to God and say, God, this is your people and your land, and take care of them. And then other than that, taking steps of, there's more than enough things that if people really want to give and donate, there's hospitals that are being built, there's medical need, there's helping people relocate, and find new housing arrangements. Back from October 7th, there was whole cities and neighborhoods destroyed. So there's a lot that can be done if someone wants to really give and support. That there's still a lot of people that are in need. So there is an actionable item that people can take. But like I said, more than anything, it's just praying that God's going to fulfill His promises.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm with you there. The Abraham Accords were a good start, and I think we need to pray for strong leaders that seek peace. And I think what I really want us to end on is that the concerns that, hey, this is Israel trying to set the entire Middle East on fire with rebuilding the temple, and it's like, no, it's supposed to be uniting. It's supposed to be a place for all people to go. And the motives behind Christians versus Jews and Arabs. I think that there's a precedent for all of us. Well, with that, Chris, do you have anywhere that anybody listening could follow up with you, get educated more on this, support you, support what's going on? What do you have?
Definitely. Well, a lot of the organizations I work with, I could direct you all of them. The one that I'm very involved with is the Christian Agency for Israel. With in regards to the Red Heifers, if they want to find out more information, you can find that out through Bonnet Israel. Um, and like I said, if you're feeling led to take a step of faith and get involved, that's where you could really like I said, we are more than happy to find a way to connect you straight to the land of Israel. Something I wanted to mention. You mentioned a really good place to start is Romans 11. Romans 11 is one of my absolute favorite chapters because it just nails it right on the head about what the Christian's role is in Israel in regards to the Jewish people and how and everything. But one thing that really does hit on, and this is what I want to encourage people, you know, um, every church reads the Abrahamic blessing. Every church reads the Aaronic blessing. I will bless you and not harm you, give you a hope and a future. All those blessings, and these churches read these blessings over and over and say, these are the blessings God gave us. But those are actually the blessings that God gave Abraham and his children, and he gave to Aaron and Moses and the Israelites. Now, that's where Romans 11 really specifies that when you become a believer, you are now a wild shoot. Let's say it's a wild olive shoot, and you are a little stick over in Des Moines, Iowa, or San Francisco, or wherever you're at. You're a little tiny little olive tree. By the grace of God, you stay alive, but you have no root system. You have no support system. So if you make a little twig with maybe you start to flower and maybe have a fruit, that would be incredible. And then we see revivals and church groups get together and you get a bunch of these little sticks and they all graft each other to each other, and then maybe they have a revival movement, and then together they're able to make one or two little olive fruits, and it's amazing, and they praise God and they're like, look, God is providing. But they have no root system, so then it dies out, just like every revival that's ever happened in this world has died out. There's no active revivals still going on. But when you understand that there is a massive olive tree with deep roots that are connected to living water, that's rooted in Israel and is the Jewish people that have been brought and rooted back in their land and is being sustained and flourished by God. When you actually graft yourself into that tree, you as a little stick, and I do this with mango trees here in America. When I take a little tiny mango stick and I graft into a big 100-year-old mango tree I have, that in 1 year, that little stick is going to produce 20, 30, 40 fruit. And that's what you're going to see is when you take your little wild shoot and you graft yourself in and root yourself in the land of Israel with the Jewish people, and you start to understand that this is a family. This isn't, you don't just get the blessings because you want the blessings. You get the blessings because you act like a family. If I have a beach house and you're my cousin and you never sent me a birthday card, you never call me, see how I'm doing, you just completely stay out of my life. When I go to that beach house with all my family, I might invite you, but I probably won't even think about you too much. But if every year you're sending me a birthday card, you're checking in on me, you're asking how my family's doing, and and my friends, and you're hanging out, every time we go to that beach house, you're getting invited because you're part of the family, you're part of the crew. And that's how these blessings work. And so what I really encourage the Christians out there is to put away the replacement theology that's replaced the modern day church, or replaced Israel of the Bible with the modern day church, and instead turn it back around and say, oh, God is calling me to take my biblical role in Israel, to take that step of faith and say, hey, this is scary, it's beyond my understanding, but God's calling me here, and I guarantee you're going to see those blessings actually pour out on your life. Because when you're rooted in Israel and you're rooted into this family that, you know, it's, you believe it's the blood family that Yeshua has brought you into, that's when you're going to see God really begin to work through you.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, that was a good place to end it. With that, I guess we'll wrap up here. Thanks everyone for tuning into this podcast. Chris, we hope to have you back on if there's any further developments that happen. But with that, thanks everyone for joining, and hit that subscribe button.
Thank you so much.